And with that, we're going to jump into our topic for today, which is AmeriCorps 2025. We're going to get started with Jerrold Mayer, the Director of the Office of Outreach and Capacity Building at the Office of Housing Counseling at HUD. The mission of the program is to train and certify housing counselors, approve new agencies, provide training and technical assistance to housing counselors, and increase public awareness of HUD's housing counseling programs. HUD seeks to enable all families to obtain, sustain, and retain their homes, and accomplishes its mission through a strong network of housing counseling agencies and HUD-certified housing counselors. Jerry has worked for HUD for 40 years, mostly in FHA-insured mortgage, housing counseling, and nonprofit programs. Following him will be Kenneth Bigos, the Executive Director at the Affordable Housing Centers of Pennsylvania. Ken has been involved with AmeriCorps connected to Housing Action Illinois for the last 2 years, and he's going to talk about the benefits and what he sees as the positive aspect of working with this AmeriCorps program. And then finally, he'll be followed by Willie Heineke, the National Service Director at Housing Action Illinois. And Willie's going to give you all of the details about the application and what the eligibility is and what the requirements are. So with that, I'm going to hand it right over to Jerry for his opening comments.
Well, thank you, Ellie, and good afternoon, and welcome to all the housing counselors and other folks who are joining us today to learn about how AmeriCorps can help agencies build up their housing counseling workforce. I want to thank the National Housing Resource Center and Housing Action Illinois for all their hard work and training and supporting housing counseling nationwide, and for bringing us this valuable topic. Housing Action Illinois is an industry leader on leveraging the advantage of AmeriCorps and has innovated the Housing Counseling Corps. Today, they'll share how the Housing Counseling Corps works, their experiences, including how AmeriCorps has benefited housing counseling agencies in the communities that they serve. You'll also learn how to leverage your grant funds to host AmeriCorps Housing Counseling Corps members. So without further ado, I'd like to hand the mic over to Ken, who will take us through today's program.
Thank you, Jerry. So good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Ken Bigos. I'm the Executive Director of the Affordable Housing Centers of Pennsylvania. We're a HUD housing counseling organization based in Philadelphia. And we have been a participant of the AmeriCorps Vista program through Housing Action Illinois since a couple of years ago, when they made their initial presentation, I think at one of the NHRC's webinars, and we pursued it, and that was definitely helpful for the fact that our communications manager was a former AmeriCorps Vista volunteer and recognized the impact having additional person on and the work that the AmeriCorps Vista does, and needed the benefit of the fact that we needed that additional help within that department. So we pursued the application with Housing Action Illinois, and after we were able to, and I'm going to talk about like how this has been a benefit to as our organization in particular, and the what to expect in the application process from my own perspective. We were able to set out what are the particular goals that we wanted that person to achieve. And with regards to, like, as always, we're trying to hire an additional staff person. However, the benefit of pursuing it through the AmeriCorps Vista compared to like a hiring someone on the job board is the fact that they are paying a stipend to the volunteer, whereby in comparison to the fact that we're paying a versus paying having us pay for a full-time staff person. So the significant cost savings in that capacity. Certainly you have to treat the application process as though it's almost like a grant application, but it's a very comprehensive process where you have to identify the particular goals that you want that person to achieve, and how that is going to be in direct impact to the organization. So we were doing that with Willie and Housing Action Illinois to make sure identifying what are the primary objectives of like having this additional person, and we were identifying that as particularly to help in supporting the housing counseling housing counselors that we do have within our communications processes. So and through that, we were able to have a normal selection process where we were able to identify the candidates that were interested in our organization, and we conducted like normal interviews with the prospective candidates, and we came to like Nara, so which is our current AmeriCorps volunteer, so much that we actually even reached out to her after the interview, saying you're going to be our top choice, that we hope that you make us your top choice, because and turned out she was, and we were able to secure her as a AmeriCorps Vista volunteer. So in addition to the $8,000 in annual fee that we pay to the Housing Action Illinois for like the annual placement fee, we even pay a stipend to NARA as a way to sweeten the opportunity, which we basically contribute to her land as a payment to her landlord to contribute to her housing costs, because understandably, like as a she's a volunteer, and I think Willie can talk about the stipend that they provide to the volunteers, that we wanted to provide an extra support to NARA. But the benefits have been significant that now it's almost a line item on our annual budget. And like the things that Nara has been able to achieve since she joined ACOPA, which we treat her as a regular employee of the organization, was she's been able to create a participant survey for some of our outreach events, which include assisting with market materials and day of the event activities. We had our annual fundraising breakfast, which she was instrumental in terms of participating with preparing information for our silent auction, helped develop our TikTok account, and responsible for creating posts, launched our annual blog, or a blog that they are sending out posts on a regular basis. Her and I are working together to do some research on our foreclosure cases and trying to create a study about what are the trends and what are the reasons for their delinquency, and to create a report that we hope to share with make available. So as you can see, a lot of activities that perhaps that I could not ask the housing counselors to do, but there is a support that that could be beneficial to the team. And with that, it's been certainly a benefit for participating in the AmeriCorps Vista program through Housing Action Illinois. And so I'm here to answer any questions anyone else has, like directly from the direct perspective of an organization perspective. So But thank you. I'll now pass it to Willie. I think he'll talk about more about the um, process of enrollment.
Thanks, Ken. Well, and I guess, do we want to take a pause and see if anybody does have questions for you, Ken, before I go ahead and get started? We can give everyone a moment to write a question in the chat.
There are no questions, and no questions in the chat, please, in the Q&A box.
Thank you.
But there are no questions right now, so go ahead, Willie.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Willie Heineke, and I'm the National Service Director of Housing Action, and I'll be going over all the ins and outs of how you can host your own Housing Counseling Corps members. And thanks to Jerry and Ken for joining us today to share your perspectives and encourage organizations to apply. So please go on to the next slide. That's a big old picture from me, of me. A little bit about me so that you know where I'm coming from. I'm here in Chicago, Illinois, and I've been working at Housing Action since November 2015. I have been, for the most part, solely focused on the organization's national service programming. And I myself have completed 3 terms of AmeriCorps Vista service in my career, with my last term actually being at Housing Action Illinois as a Vista leader. So in my role, I directly supervise a team of staff members and specific positions called Vista leaders that together coordinate our annual programming by managing a current cohort of about 30 AmeriCorps members while collaborating with organizations to recruit the next cohort of members. And that's all you need to know about me for the purpose of this webinar. Please go on to the next slide. Here's a brief overview of the agenda I have for my time during this webinar. I'll first start off by giving a high-level perspective of what Housing Action Illinois is and what our Housing Action Corps is all about. I'll then jump into our host site application process, which is the means by which you all can apply to host positions. And then I'll jump into our recruitment process and explain how we collaborate with one another to successfully find somebody to fill your position. And then I'll wrap up by explaining some of the ins and outs of how we manage and retain these AmeriCorps members to finish their terms of service and have a successful year with you. Next slide, please. And go on to the next one too, because we're jumping into the program overview. And before I go into that explanation, I want to take a moment to explain that Housing Action Illinois is a coalition of over 175 organizations spread across Illinois that are in some way, shape, or form focused on ending homelessness and ensuring everyone has a stable, affordable place to call home. Now, Housing Action Illinois does a lot of things. We work on advocacy and organizing around state and federal level issues for policies, but we also provide, and in that way we unite the voice of our coalition to advance and advocate for equitable policies. Now, the other part of Housing Action is our services that we provide directly to our organizations. So and that's where our Housing Action Corps comes in. We also function as a intermediary of a housing counseling program for HUD. So we are in, I believe it's 8 states now, maybe more, providing pass-through dollars and trainings for housing counseling organizations. And our Housing Action Corps, which go on to the next slide, is what I'll be here to explain all the details about. And we collaborate nationwide as well. So currently we have organizations in 6 states hosting positions. And for some of you all that aren't familiar with AmeriCorps, I want to just take a brief moment to explain that there are a few different branches of AmeriCorps. And the one that we're here to talk about today, and the one that Housing Action collaborates with, is called AmeriCorps VISTA, which is an acronym that stands for Volunteers in Service to America. Not many people are familiar with AmeriCorps. There was a brand awareness survey that was completed a few years ago at this point that showed only 17% of the American population could explain the purpose and correctly identify AmeriCorps VISTA. So sometimes you might hear them referred to as interns or fellows, or there's another word that I'm blanking on right now, and that's okay, because they're none of those things. They're their very own specific brand. And if you have a hard time explaining what they are to people or need a simile, you can refer to them as the domestic version of the Peace Corps. This is not the first year that Housing Action has worked with AmeriCorps VISTA. We've actually been receiving funding and coordinating positions since 2010. And since then, we've worked with over 80 organizations and, excuse me, with those 88 organizations, we've had over collectively 400 members and summer associate positions. Now, annually, that looks like us offering about 30 full-year positions and 30 summer associates at 25 to 35 organizations. And you see that asterisk on the summer associate bullet point of this slide, because unfortunately, we are not able to offer summer associates this year, nor were we able to last year, which is a decision made by the federal agency of AmeriCorps due to funding restrictions that are in place. So go to the next slide, please. So just want to highlight some of the 24-25 results for our performance with our Housing Counseling Corps initiative specifically. So for the most part, for the longest time, Housing Action has collaborated with our organizations within our coalition located in Illinois. But last year, we launched our ability to collaborate with organizations across the nation, like ACOPA and KEN. And of those 7 organizations that hosted positions, 5 continued hosting with us into this year. 4 of the 6 members that finished their terms of service successfully passed the HUD exam, and 2 of the members, one of which at ACOPA, decided to stay on for a second year of service and continue with their organizations. And of course, along the way, they've built many new systems and enhanced currently existing systems of their organizations. They raised hundreds of thousands of dollars and have, at the end of the day, ensured that hundreds of people, if not thousands, are receiving quality housing counseling services. So go on to the next slide, please. I always like to have this slide here. It's a rudimentary program chart that I made to explain the structure of our program. And so, to be clear, the reason I really want to share this is just to show that I myself and all of the Housing Action staff members and team members that we have focused on this program really see ourselves at the same level as the people that are serving as AmeriCorps members, as AmeriCorps leaders, as well as the organizations that are hosting and the people that are supervising the positions. Sometimes it can feel hierarchical in that Housing Action is responsible for maintaining program compliance, collecting reports, and so it can feel like we're your funder, and we really don't see ourselves in that manner. We are only able to, we only do the liaisoning and the communications and lead those efforts with the federal agency through the Midwest Regional Office of AmeriCorps so that you all don't have to, so that you can focus on the needs of your community and the projects that you're working on. So those arrows that you see on the slide are supposed to show the types of communication that happens within the program. And the clear point that I want to make here is we're all in communication with each other. There's a lot of different ways and times in which we'll be collaborating and communicating with one another, but it's not like Housing Action says something to the AmeriCorps leaders and the AmeriCorps leaders say it to the hosting organizations that say it to their supervisors and members, right? We are all in touch with each other in one way or form or another. So go on to the next slide, please. These are just some of the pillars of AmeriCorps Vista. And if you look at them, I think it's pretty obvious why we have this kind of project here at Housing Action and why it can be useful to your organizations, right? I'm not going to go into depth on all of them because obviously providing quality housing counseling services can lead to ending poverty. Now, one thing I do want to explain here is that these positions do focus on capacity building or indirect service. So for the most part, these positions should focus on more behind the scenes work of your organization, helping your housing counselors get more clients or offer services more efficiently. So the work that they do accomplish should be sustainable as well, right? We want to make sure that the projects and the work that they put into place are sustained by the organizations after their position or their projects end. So go on to the next slide, please. Ken got into this a little bit, but there are some key differences between AmeriCorps Vista members and employees. AmeriCorps members are volunteers. They're a part of a federal program, and so they receive different financial benefits and professional development opportunities than your standard employee might. They also are only on your team for a year, right? There are the option to stay on for a second year or even a third year in rare occasions, but these positions are 1 year long, and they, again, generally speaking, are focused on that indirect service, that capacity building. I'll get into it in a little bit later on about how the direct services that they can provide, but for the most part, they should be focused on building the capacity of your organization. So please go on to the next slide. Here are those benefits that the members receive that make a clear difference between them and their employees at your organization. You can see that annual living allowance they make at $24,000 is far less than any of your staff members are, or full-time staff members, I should say, are earning, I'm sure. They do get a slew of other benefits too. They're eligible for up to a little over $7,000 to pay for student loans or future tuition costs. If they are moving over 50 miles to serve at your organization, they're eligible for those types of relocation benefits. And we do have some other specific benefits to our Chicago and Illinois-based organizations, but we do encourage organizations to offer supplemental benefits. Ken mentioned that they help their AmeriCorps member pay part of their rent, and that does wonders for your ability to recruit your positions and retain them. And one of the lesser known benefits of the program is the non-competitive eligibility status. So our AmeriCorps members are eligible for federal employment in a way that puts them at the top of the stack of applications when they're considering federal employment. Go on to the next slide, please. So here is what a year collaborating with us will look like if you choose to apply, right? So our applications are available today. to apply, and they'll be due at the end of January. I'm gonna throw some of those materials in the chat right now, but my computer is slowing down, so please be patient with me. There they are. So you'll get your applications into us in February and March. We review the applications. We provide feedback to you all to make edits if needed. And then by the end of March, middle of March, we approve the positions and get them submitted to the federal agency. So then by April, we will collaborate with you to recruit the positions. We don't force you to hire anybody, right? The end decision is yours, but we do support you along the way to make your lives easier in the recruitment process. The positions then begin in August. We have standard start dates that are required by the federal agency of AmeriCorps. We then offer a series of trainings for our members that are focused on helping them be successful in their terms of service. And we specifically offer our Housing Counseling Corps members the option to, or the opportunity, I should say, to we offer them the opportunity to participate in Housing Action specialized trainings that help them pass the HUD exam. And like I mentioned, 4 of the 6 members that completed their terms of service with us last year successfully did pass the HUD exam to become HUD certified housing counselors. In December and January, we conduct virtual site visits with our organizations to make sure things are going according to plan, answer any questions, make sure everyone's operating in program compliance. And then we you don't hear from us that much because we're focused on recruiting organizations to host in the next year, but we do offer our members another series of trainings in April that are focused on helping them be successful after their term of service, right? Things like resume writing, cover letters, how to find jobs. We bring our alumni together to share advice with them. And at the end of August 2026, the members finish their positions, send in their reports, and that is what a full year looks like with us. So there are a slew of resources that are made available to organizations that host positions with us. We throw our own webinars to provide trainings to the staff and at organizations on how to recruit well, how to onboard and supervise their positions, as well as reporting. We provide manuals and templates for you to build from so that your lives can be as easy as can be and participate in the program. We offer one-on-one meetings all the time, and we offer our own virtual open spaces for our members and supervisors as well on a monthly basis. So that is what a whole year can look like with us, broadly speaking. So go on to the next slide, Ellie. Thank you. So now I want to dive into the host site application process, which is really the critical next step if you want to participate in the program. Now, I am noticing somebody mentioned I didn't share the materials, and that's right, because I accidentally just shared it with the hosts and panelists, and I meant to share it with everyone. There you go. Thank you for mentioning that, Hugo. Next slide, please. So our application has 2 components. There's an online application and there's a supplemental document. Our online application is a fairly straightforward Google form that asks for information regarding your organization, what staff members are going to work with us. We then do start to ask questions about your project, what type of quantifiable goals you have in mind for the position. But for the most part, it is straightforward and should only take a couple hours to complete, if that. Now, the supplemental document is well, I should say the online application, excuse me, I'm coughing a little bit. I'm going to take a sip of water. That's better. The online application has information that we do share with the federal government, the organization, the staff member that's working with us, some of the quantifiable goals, things like that. But the supplemental document is information that we directly copy paste verbatim. So this takes organizations a little bit longer usually. And the supplemental document has two sections. The first is a community need statement. And using citable sources, we require organizations to explain their community and the clients they serve. Why are their services necessary? What levels of housing insecurity is there? Are there demographic information? Anything that's related to the type of projects that you want your position to work on, because then you'll also explain you'll also explain with citable sources how your project is likely to be successful. What evidence do you have that completing the type of work your position will focus on is likely to address the community needs you explained? And that second section of the supplemental document is called a VISTA assignment description. And there's nothing quite like a VISTA assignment description. It's pretty unique to this program. However, you can think about it as the combination of a job description and a work plan, right? This is an opportunity to show to the federal agency what specific objectives you have for the position, what projects they'll work on, and the activities they'll do to complete those objectives and achieve the overall mission of your organization and project. Now, because I'm explaining the entire program, this and all the ins and outs of it, I'm not going to pull up the application and go step by step with you, because we actually have a webinar coming up in January that I will step by step look for and show you how to complete your application and write a compelling application. I just noticed the registration link wasn't working, didn't copy paste. So I just shared the registration link in the chat too. We also have a host site application guide. I shared that information earlier. That has examples of both community need statements and VISTA assignment descriptions, and has a lot of big picture information that you'll need to keep in mind when submitting your application. So go on to the next slide, please, Ellie. So here's that application timeline in more detail. The applications are due on that last Friday, January 31st. And then during February and March, we do provide feedback and allow you to make edits to your application. And I think that's a unique part about participating in a program with us. Whereas like if you apply to the federal agency, and I'm sure you executive directors, you development professionals out there know that sometimes grantors and funders, you submit your application and they tell you yes or no. But since we're not a funder, right? Since we function as like the glue and trying to help you get approved by the federal agency, we do provide feedback and help you write a strong application. And as you can see from our 2024 data, we approved 95% of the applications that were submitted to us. And of those positions that we approved, the federal agency approved 100%, right? So after we announce our awards on March 17th, we submit the positions for the federal agency's review and get everything lined up on our end so that we can begin recruiting with you on April 23rd, 2024. Next slide, please, Ellie. Now, this is the financial commitment information you need to understand to participate in the program. So we have a $8,000 program project participation fee that's charged to every organization as a matter of cost sharing our positions. The way our budget and programming work is we're expected to pay that $24,000 living allowance for many of the positions. And rather than charge one organization all of their living allowance fees, we spread that cost among all of our organizations. So we're able to offer you the opportunity to participate at $8,000. Now, that's the only mandatory part of the financial commitment. However, as we've brought up a few times during this webinar, we do strongly encourage offering supplemental benefits. We start to see an increase in the likelihood to recruit and retain your positions once you get up to $300 monthly. And that helpfulness of the supplemental benefit in terms of attracting quality candidates, making sure your members are able to complete their term of service, only goes up the more you offer. And so we have many organizations offering $500. Now, there are some organizations that are offering even more, right? There's a few in Illinois, there's one in DC that are offering that just pay the full out rent for their members. And that looks at around $1,100 or $1,200. And to be in compliance with the federal agency, there does have to be a limit. And the way that we've structured it with our program is saying that the most you can offer is whatever the National Low Income Housing Coalition's out of reach report says is the 1-bedroom fair market rent price in your state. And so I know for in Illinois, that's $1,000 or $1,289. And I can find the one on your state upon request. And it's a pretty simple report too that you could access as well. Next slide, please. So here are some of the best practices I do offer to organizations when considering completing the application. And that first one is starting with the supplemental document, right? It says supplemental, but it is required. And it's the part that organizations tell me is the most thoughtful part, right? The one that they need to spend the most of the time that they spend completing the application on, whereas that Google form is asking just some fairly simple information. So I encourage you to start backwards and work on the supplemental document and then worry about the online application. In that online application, there are sections where we ask you to explain your recruitment and data tracking strategies. And that can feel like something that you want to skimp on, or you may think it's not as important as what the projects will be, or what the outcomes, like how many people will be served. But these are just as important as any part of the application, right? It doesn't matter how well-defined your goals are and how important your position is if we can't find somebody to do it. So we do collaborate with you in the recruitment process, which I'll explain on the next section of this webinar, but having thoughtful and specific strategies on how you're going to attract candidates or interview your positions leads to a strong application. And similarly with the data tracking, the way I like to say it is it should be explained well enough in the application so that when your position starts and our AmeriCorps leader is having a call with your AmeriCorps member, and if they're having trouble understanding where they should find the information to report on certain quantifiable goals related to their position, the AmeriCorps leader should be able to go back into that application, read it, and give guidance that could be as helpful as a staff member doing it at your organization. And then these positions projects should explain and have that long-term focus, right? Positions, generally speaking and typically speaking, are offered on a 3-year project basis, right? You can have positions longer than that, but they have to focus on different projects. So my point being is the work that they focus on and complete during their term of service should continue on after they leave. It shouldn't just be something that is relied on the VISTA program to make happen at your organization. And sometimes it can feel difficult to understand exactly how to make the best use of a VISTA member or what new projects are going on at your organization. And so most organizations have a strategic plan in place, and I encourage you to use that as a means for identifying potential projects at your organization. Next slide, please, Ellie. Now, here are some common challenges that people and organizations have with our application. We are, like, as I understand it, almost every organization is understaffed and overworked, and there is so much administrative burden that is placed upon organizations, particularly participating in government grants. So it can feel easy to say, you know, I could definitely use a VISTA member to help do all of the paperwork I have to do. Or it can be easy to think of them as interns, and these positions should not solely focus on administrative paperwork or be thought of as like a coffee and copies internship. These should be focused on that indirect capacity building. And so I know many of you all are housing counseling agencies and provide direct services. And your housing counseling corps member, right, once they pass the exam, is able to offer direct services like a first-time home buyer class or foreclosure mitigation to clients of yours. However, that can't be the sole responsibility of the position, right? So there should be some indirect capacity building work, filling out grants and submitting them, creating new communication materials, doing outreach to get more clients in your doors, things like that. Now, I know I explained that we're all overworked and understaffed, and so it can be easy to put things off, but I do encourage you to not wait until the week of the application to apply if that's something you're interested in doing and want to join up with us this year, right? We have that webinar coming up in January. You have access to the materials right now, so it's definitely an opportunity for you to get started or get the wheels turning at least before the week of the application. And kind of that inverse of what I explained last time of just not considering how the project outcomes will be measured, right? So if you write a grant, if your AmeriCorps Vista writes a grant to get more staff, and those staff provide more housing counseling services, then those services should be counted as a result of the grant that the Vista got. And so just making sure there's a clear delineation of how the capacity building services your Vista is working on will at the end of the day help people receive the services you provide. And with that, that's the end of the host site application process. Ellie, you want to go to the next slide? Now, and I know usually there's a fairly big drop off around this time of the webinar, so feel free to write any questions in the chat. I just want to take a few minutes to allow that while I also take a sip of water and move into the next part of the webinar. Okay, and I'm also seeing a few questions in the Q&A. So Ellie, can you actually go back a slide? Because what do we think? Should I answer these questions now before I go into the recruitment so I catch everybody before the drop off, or should I just move on and we'll answer these at the end?
We can take some time to answer a few of the questions. I think one of the, something that kind of keeps popping in is about the training that you're going to offer, and can people, even if they aren't able to attend, is there going to be a recording available?
Absolutely. Of course there is. And what a great question to have. And I'm excited to hear people are interested in attending those, that January webinar. So my contact information will be shared at the end of this. I can share my email in the chat, but if you register for that webinar and you're not able to attend, you will still get a recording of that sent to you.
So you're saying people can register even if they can't attend, and they'll automatically get the recording?
That's correct.
Okay. And then the just to answer for other people, because I think the question also came up about our presentation. So if anybody is asking about our presentation, this one that's happening today, it does go out in email, actually, to our whole listserv, the link to the recording, the link to the PowerPoint, and then all of the links that are presented in the session are also added to that email that will go out to everybody early next week. And then people are asking about, so talk a little bit more about the allowance. Is it standard?
Yeah.
Do you have to be, and do you have to be a member of Housing Action Illinois? Can you be in a different state? These are all the kind of questions that are going on.
Yeah. Happy to go through those. So the living allowance, that $24,000, it breaks down to like $967 biweekly. That's standard. That's what Housing Action pays your AmeriCorps member, right? So, and one way to think about it is like that $8,000 that you're paying to participate in the program gets turned into $24,000 for your AmeriCorps member themselves. So that already triples in value. Now, I see another one. There is no charge to apply, right? And to be clear too, that $8,000 that we invoice organizations, we only invoice you if we successfully recruit the position. There's no expectation for you to pay the $8,000 up front to apply or to begin recruiting with us. We only charge you if we successfully recruit with you. And organizations across the nation can host these housing counseling core positions, right? At this moment, we don't offer, like, organizations within Illinois can focus on other types of housing related, whether that's accessible, supportive, fair housing, whatever kind of housing focused work a nonprofit is doing. But we specifically offer housing counseling focused positions to anybody in the great United States. And so if you're an organization outside of Illinois, you don't have to become a member of Housing Action to host an AmeriCorps Vista position. And I have one question in here that says, do you have to be a certified housing counseling agency? Or will you allow an organization to work with an intermediary? And it's my understanding that you have to be a HUD certified housing counseling agency to offer housing counseling services. So I will say we have had members who get placed with an organization, and part of their role is to help the organization become HUD certified, right? And even to become HUD certified, you have to have a HUD certified housing counselor. And so they sometimes function as one of the people that is a HUD certified member of the organization. So I'm not quite sure if that means an organization.
So I just want to say it is if you are a housing counseling organization that is with an intermediary, the intermediary is the one that is giving you the approval. So I'm not quite sure what the question is exactly. If you are under an intermediary, you are a HUD-approved housing counseling organization.
Yeah,
If you are with a HUD intermediary.
got it. Okay.
So
Well, maybe that.
one thing that I really wanted to kind of get to Ken, because somebody was asking, we're particularly interested in understanding what other organizations have done to supplement the stipend and the requirements for in-person versus remote work post-pandemic. So I thought, Ken, maybe you could opine a little bit on that topic.
Sure. So certainly we wanted to make sure, like as Willie has mentioned, if like an organization can provide additional supplementary stipend that can help in terms of like recruiting better candidates and have interest in your organization. So now, as a result, we decided to provide a $500 stipend for um, the AmeriCorps Vista that we identify and we select that to help them with their housing costs. And that has, and with that, what we do is make a payment, or when we don't sign the check to like the AmeriCorps Vista, because that's almost like payroll, but we're just make it payable to their landlord, just to help in reducing those costs. And my Vista came from Florida, and she relocated to Pennsylvania, you know, to begin her AmeriCorps journey. So therefore, you know, so that it's not though these candidates are just going to be someone that's in a local market. They're also those that maybe say like, I am eager to perhaps learn about a new city, or just like relocate just to and to explore. So in Mike, so therefore that's just to answer that question in terms of where, like in my situation, my experience.
And is there a limit to the number of members an organization can hire?
That has to be my favorite question of any webinar I've ever had on this topic. And the short answer is no, right? If you got $8,000 and you want to, offer and you want to, or if you have the $8,000 per position, I'll approve as many positions as you want. Now, let's see here. In the past, I'm trying to think. One of our organizations has hosted 6 positions, and I would want to hear. I'd probably have like a one-on-one discussion with you to hear how you think you're well equipped to host more than that on your first year with us. But again, I would love to have that conversation and hear your thoughts on that. So, short answer is no, but in pencil, maybe we'd say, I'd be surprised if we approved more than 6 positions at an organization. And one final one I see in the chat, and just a reminder to do your best to submit questions in the Q&A box, that it asks if the individuals have to become HUD certified to work in the role. And no, right? Like I said, 4 out of the 6 positions last year passed the exam. So there were 2 that weren't able to do so, and they were still able to complete their service and complete meaningful projects for the organization. I believe the member serving with Ken is enrolling in law school, so that person won't stay on as a staff member unless plans change. So, but still completing meaningful projects that are going to be sustained by the organization, and Ken's intending to collaborate with us next year to continue participating in the program and find another great candidate. So
And
That's
I'll
it
just give
for now.
one more reminder to everybody to put your questions in the Q&A box because the chat keeps scrolling and we'll lose track of them. So please, any questions should go into the Q&A box. And with that, I'm going to mute.
Great, and I'm gonna get going because we have till about. I wanna not speed through the end of this, but I do wanna be cognizant of everyone's time. So let's move on to the next slide. Right, so here's some recruitment statistics before I get into more of the details on the process of how we find you a great candidate. I want to just share some of the high level information about how we're performing. And so as you can see, since 2017, we're having a bit of a decline in our recruitment success rate, hitting that low in 2021 of only recruiting less than half of the positions we intended to do so. But then in 2023, we made some strategic decisions on how to enhance our internal process of getting you candidates and you interviewing them that led to us nearly doubling our successful recruitment rate while seeing a slight downturn in the number of applications per position that we're applying. And in 2024, we've continued to increase our successful recruitment rate. And actually in 2023, we recruited the largest cohort in our organization's history with 41 members joining the program effective August 2023. And at the bottom of the slide, you can see that impact of those supplemental benefits, right? If organizations offered at least $300, they recruited 90% of the positions that they intended to, whereas among the organizations that didn't offer supplemental benefits, we're down to 70% last year. So I understand money is tight and it's hard to find these types of it's hard to find funding for even your current staff at some points, but doing the most you can to offer those supplemental benefits will result in you having a much more likely success in recruiting your position. So next slide. And here are some specific recruitment dates that you need to keep in mind. Now, I mentioned it earlier, right? These start dates of August 11th and 25th are predetermined by the federal agency. There is a lot of work that goes into onboarding these positions on the federal agency side of things that means that we can't start them whenever we want. And accordingly, that means we also have to give the federal agency notice. So, but you have to successfully recruit your position a month before it starts. And it is okay if your organization has a remote work service policy in place that allows for fully remote work. It's okay for your member to start remotely and even serve remotely for that matter. And to be clear, that nomination deadline is the date that we guarantee if a member is if somebody accepts your offer and completes all the paperwork that's required to submit their application for the federal agency's review. And so that means they have to fill out a special application on the AmeriCorps portal, which is essentially what USA Jobs is to federal employment is what the AmeriCorps portal is to AmeriCorps positions. And so that, to be clear, that's like if you call me on that July 11th at 4:00 and say, hey, we just had somebody accept my offer that I made to them over the phone, it's by the deadline, so we're good, right? They can start on August 11th. I'll have to say, probably not, unless they get all their, unless everything is ready to be submitted, then they won't be able to secure that start date. So that's all I have to say about that for now. Go on to the next slide, please. Now, here is that specific recruitment process. And so to be clear, we actually handle all of the screening of people that apply to your position through this AmeriCorps portal. Right now, you'll be spreading the word in your own ways, on your own social media, on your websites, at local schools. And so people may apply directly to you, and that's great if that happens, and you'll have to screen those yourselves. But for the most part, most of our positions are recruited via the AmeriCorps portal. And so housing action staff and AmeriCorps leaders will screen the applications that are submitted. We have our own scorecard that we use to review the applications that we make available to you via a Google Drive system that we put in place for you. You then review the scorecard and decide if you want to conduct the interview. And if you want to make an offer, you let us know that you want to make the, you want to offer the position, and then Housing Action handles the formal written offer, and we conduct a call with the member or applicant for that matter to make sure all of the key information is understood. And then we submit their application for the federal agency's review by by the AmeriCorps, by the applicant accepting the position on the AmeriCorps portal. So just to clarify, right, like you can, if you want to offer the position, make a call, send an email, you can offer the position to them, but there is a formal process that has to be completed, and we take the lead on doing so that you don't have to worry about those types of details. And right, we do not force you to offer the position to somebody. That is, it's your organization, it's your role, you're the supervisor. We're not going to make you host somebody that you don't want to. Next slide, please. Yeah, and so I mentioned that earlier on the start date, that it's okay if they serve remotely on that first day. And so here's the remote service policy that's in place for our program, that's guided by the federal agency's policies. And so members can serve full-time, fully remotely, if that's allowable by your organization. I know most organizations are becoming into some sort of hybrid office schedule. So the short version to think about it is whatever is expected of your staff should be expected of your Housing Counseling Corps member. Now, that fully remote status does have to be within a reasonably commutable distance to your office, which is defined by you at your organization. So essentially, the federal agency is saying it's okay if they serve remotely, if that's okay with your organization, but they should still be in the community where they're serving. So the days of somebody living here in Illinois and serving remotely for an organization in New York are over. But it is up to you. And so the best example I have for that is here in Chicago, some people live in northwestern Indiana and commute to Chicago for their jobs. And so to a layperson or somebody not from the area, hearing that a member living in northwestern Indiana, that might not sound like a reasonable commutable distance, but we here in Chicago know that it is. And so we leave that decision making up to you at your organization. Next slide, please. Oh, that's right. That's it for recruitment. We're going to go on to management and retention, which is the last section of my slides for this webinar. So Ellie, please, thank you. Again, here's just some big picture retention statistics. And you can see, our overall program history is right at where the federal agency wants us, right, hovering around that 80% mark, specifically at 78 in this case. But last year, we actually put some new measures in place. We have a new reporting system. we've done a lot of things internally to lead to an increase in that retention. And now in 2024, we're currently rocking a stellar retention rate, but we do expect there to be a few people end their terms early for various reasons before the end of their year. But I would be very glad if we stayed at 92% retention throughout the year. And specifically, that means somebody completing the full year of service. And some of these people that leave early, I'll note, it's not always because of a conflict at work or something like that. Like there's been one of these people that early exited because the organization offered him a staff position that became available. So there are, in quotes, good reasons why people exit early. And then at the bottom of the screen, you can see some points from our alumni outcomes report we published that covered our performance in setting our members up for success after their terms of service. And some of the points I like to point out is that nearly a third of organizations, or a little bit more than a quarter of organizations, hired the staff members or hired the AmeriCorps members to become staff members at their organization after the term of service ended. Next slide, please. So a lot of text on this slide. I'm not going to read every single bullet point to you. Broadly speaking, Housing Action's role in the management and retention responsibilities is providing the overall program structure, right? We design the monthly reports. We facilitate trainings that are available to all of our AmeriCorps members. We're the ones that are processing the living allowance payments to them. Whereas your responsibilities are more so focused on the day-to-day management, right? Providing guidance on the projects that you want them working on, and providing that one-on-one support to them. So, however, I hope it is clear too that like throughout this webinar, I've been explaining that, we at no point do we abandon you in this program, right? We collaborate with you every step of the way, and we do our best to make sure we're not providing more bureaucracy or paperwork for you, but really just trying to simplify your ability to access the AmeriCorps resources. Next slide, please. And so here are some of those best practices I want to share about managing and retaining your Vista members. We strongly encourage having weekly one-on-one meetings. If things are going smoothly and everyone's happy with their performance, it's fine if those meetings go to every other week. But we do encourage you to do your best to make sure that you do meet with them at least every other week. Right. As you clearly saw, the members are not paid a living wage. $24,000 is not enough, no matter where you live. So one of the best ways to help them complete their terms of service is by starting the conversations early on about what they want to do after this term of service ends. And in our ideal world for the Housing Counseling Corps, they're hired on by you as a HUD certified housing counselor, or they go on to become a HUD certified housing counselor at another organization. But that isn't always the case, right? Like I said earlier, we know the person serving with ACOPA and Ken is planning on enrolling in law school. So, right, helping them think about what the purpose of them doing, like what's their personal gain from this, aside from the great experience that they're gaining through this professional opportunity, helps them finish their term of service. And this should go for staff members or really anybody you're working with, but do your best to thank people personally and recognize them publicly. So whether it's at an all-staff meeting, in front of a funder, at your organization's conference or fundraiser, or what have you, doing your best to recognize your Vista members' term of service and the sacrifice they're making by volunteering for you for a year does wonders for their likelihood to finish their terms with you, because then they'll know how important it is to you. Like I mentioned earlier with that role, or with that brand awareness and few people knowing what AmeriCorps is, communicate to other staff members ahead of the position starting what this AmeriCorps Vista member will be focused on and what AmeriCorps is. Right, it can be pretty debilitating when you're in service if other staff members are blatantly unaware of your service or even what you're working on, and it can help prevent other staff members from asking them to do work that's inappropriate for Vista members to be focused on, so that they can stay focused on the projects you've assigned them. And last, surely not least, is use that Vista assignment description. We do put a lot of work into it. It's a key part of the application, and it's a useful tool throughout the year. At the beginning of the year, it sets the goals and guidelines for what people and these positions will focus on. Throughout it can be used as a means for evaluating performance. And also, one thing about the VET is that it's not written in stone, right? It can be edited and based on shifts in your organization's priorities or skills that you didn't anticipate your AmeriCorps member having. Next slide, please. So those common challenges: the living stipends below the federal minimum wage. It is a hurdle for anybody to survive in our nation, in our communities, with that level of pay. So doing your best to make the member aware of low to no cost resources in your community, free fun events and activities, giving a locals guide to your community, especially if they're relocating, can do a lot to help them make the most of that living allowance. And since this is most people's first office jobs, they're not used to getting direct deposits set up and getting their payroll set up. So making sure that in that first week of service, you give them time on the clock to run to their bank to get the form they need, or really just holding their hand while they complete that part of the onboarding process goes a long way. Because, you know, even though they're not getting paid much, it is even worse to not receive your first paycheck. Now, right, I mentioned it in the application process, but having difficulty reporting and tracking the impact they're having, members can feel quite disillusioned and unmotivated if they're not able to understand the impact they're having at the organization. And so doing your best to make a clear delineation of what they're supposed to report on will help them in their terms. And I mentioned that it's okay to change the VAD, and it is, but if it's something that you're changing several times throughout the year, that's going to lead to your member feeling like their work isn't important in the projects they're focused on, or thrown together rather than strategically planned for them to work on. And then this one, obviously, outside of a lot of our control, but having a whole bunch of changes at the host site, whether that's staffing or funding, strategic priority shifting, moving offices, right? A lot of that is outside of the control of anybody. But doing your best to ensure that the supervisor changes as few times as possible, right, will go a long way in helping your member complete their term of service. And with that, the next slide is a snapshot of the impact that our members had at their organizations in the 23-24 program. Now, this is the whole program overall, not the specific housing counseling positions, but right, over $1 million in grants and cash and in-kind donations, over 15,000 people receiving housing services, with 625 units repaired or developed or made available. And so if you participate in this program and go through all the steps that I explained, this is the type of impact that you can start to expect at your own organizations. And so with the next slide being the last slide for me, and that's my contact information. And these PowerPoint slides will be made available. So if you want to schedule a call with me, you can click that link and it pops up my availability indefinitely to have one-on-one calls, and I'd be happy to do so. But you can also feel free to join that webinar in January. So that is my presentation for everybody. I can feel free to type more questions in the chat. I know I see a couple of questions that I can start to answer right now, but feel free to keep coming with questions. So I see one from Debbie on how does a Vista volunteer live on that small amount of money? Do they hold other jobs? Debbie, it boggles my mind. I know when I did service in Arizona, I was only able to make it work because I had lived there for 2 years prior to my term of service, and I was living in a $100 a month room where it was akin to having a bedroom under the staircase. But in all seriousness, yes, some like the federal agency does allow for people to hold outside employment. For a while, they actually did not allow it. So some members do hold outside jobs, working as servers or bartenders or doing really any other part-time work that their seasonal work that becomes available. And many, since it's gotten to the point that I believe, I know the majority, but I won't even say the vast majority. I think like 3/4 of our organizations offer a supplemental benefit. And so the other way that they make that living allowance work is by having an organization that offers a strong supplemental benefit. Yeah, so that's my answer to that question. And I see another one that came in from an anonymous attendee saying that they're a loan officer looking to get involved. And so am I eligible to host a position? If you're a loan officer, I'm employed at Housing Action because I'm very good at AmeriCorps. I am not the most knowledgeable about all the housing world, but in my mind, a loan officer is at a bank versus being at a nonprofit organization. But if you are at like a CDFI and you're a loan officer, like any 501c3 or religious or governmental organization, agency can host positions, but banks and LLCs are not eligible to host positions.
But can they participate in your program? If they're a CDFI or a
Yes.
nonprofit?
Yeah, heck yeah. Yes. Thank you for that clarification, Ellie.
Okay. I don't see any other questions unless something popped into the chat that I missed, but that seems to be the end of them.
Yeah, and I'm just checking the chat just in case somebody mistakenly put one in there, but
All right, well, while you're
see
checking
one.
that out, I am gonna move us forward to thank everybody for participating and want to remind you all about joining NHRC as a member. This is how we survive. This is the one way that we get a lot of support financially to do the work that we do on your behalf. We have the upcoming Leaders in Housing Counseling webinars that I mentioned earlier. And these are the ones that are coming up. This was the last one for this year, and we'll start anew on January 16th, 2025. And we want to thank you all again for taking the time to join us.